Good morning, guys. I had an amazing night. I slept warm, dry, very comfortably. But it wasn't here. I came out here yesterday to make an emergency shelter. I succeeded in the shelter. But in the process, I got extremely wet. Very wet. Everything was wet. It was snowing, and the snow was wet. The snow on the ground was wet. And my idea of the emergency shelter was to get away from the elements, because that's what the shelter is about, to get away from the elements, the wind, the cold, the moisture, the rain, the snow. But in winter time, it's tough. It's really tough. And you have to basically make decisions all the way. I also deliberately came out here with no tools whatsoever, as if I was out in the forest skiing, far from home, and got caught with bad weather, and I had to make a decision. And one that an option wouldn't be to be able to go home. And but circumstances are such in winter also that whatever you do, whatever shelter you're gonna build, your only decision is to keep dry. That's your only option, to be dry and safe from the elements. The idea of this kind of shelter is to make a shelter right there on the spot, that most likely you don't have the time to ski around, walk around, find the best spot, find the best places. Sometimes your best option is right where you are, and you have to figure it out, because that's where you are caught. You can't afford to ski around or walk around to find the best choices. And having no tools, you have to use your hands, you have to use your legs, which I did. I was digging up with my legs and shoveling it out with my hands. It would be foolish to just sleep on the snow directly. So next best option was to gather some spruce twigs and put it in there and sleep in it. And believe me, my intention was to come out here and spend the night here. But this whole thing raises a different scenario. What's the best way to do these things? How do you keep yourself dry? How do you keep yourself safe? You know, building a shelter in winter time, your only goal is to not get wet. Because if you get wet, that's it. You're gonna have a miserable night. So what kind of shelter do you make? You have to come up with a shelter that makes you spend the least amount of energy, because the more you move around, the more you exercise, the more you apply yourself, the more you're gonna get sweaty. That's winter. And yesterday I got sweaty. I got wet from the snow, from inside, from outside. And I probably just spent half an hour to put this thing together, to dig it out, my size, and big enough for me to be able to turn and spread and not feel like I'm inside a coffin. Big enough to accommodate the spruce branches for the bedding, the insulation. And I did that. But the process itself of building this, of making this, even though it was just half an hour, it was crazy. I got completely wet. You can see today, this morning, that all the snow has dripped off of the trees. The trees are full of droplets. Everything is soaked. I left my skis here to give the impression that this place is untouched in the morning and I would come out. But just walking here this morning, it was tough. The snow is deep. I walked in the footsteps from yesterday night, but I still got sweaty just from walking. So yesterday I made the decision. Rather than spending the night here with my wet clothes, my best option was to go home, play it safe. That was the best decision for this scenario. There are numerous kinds of shelters we can make in winter time, but what is common for all of them is that it requires work. The more you apply yourself, the more you work, the more effort you put in it, the more sweaty you're gonna get. And this, for me, I want to raise the conversation about the question about how do you go about to make the best shelter in the least possible effort, where you keep dry, you stay away from the elements, and you have a nice, it's not gonna be nice, still gonna be miserable, but you're gonna make the best options for you as possible. What I learned from this was that even though I probably only just spent 30 minutes digging this thing out and getting the spruce twigs, branches, create a bedding in it, I got wet. I got wet from inside from sweating, and I got wet from outside from the snow and from digging. And yesterday the snow that was falling was also wet in itself. It is April and the weather is getting warmer. But so the questions that come up is, yes, I could have traveled around trying to find a big spruce tree and lie under there, maybe reinforce the sides, and only concentrate my effort on putting the bedding, making the bedding with more spruce twigs, and in that way maybe stay a bit drier. But circumstances are also so that we can see from this morning that all the snow from the trees have dripping down, so you're still gonna get wet. For me, maybe with this kind of shelter, maybe the best option would have been to save my jacket from getting soaked, remove my jacket, put it aside, and then do the work and get my inner clothing soaked in sweat or minimize the sweat, I don't know, and then when everything is ready, then put on my jacket. Maybe that would have been the best option. Winter is tough. Winter is very tough. What kind of shelter do you build to minimize your efforts so that you don't get sweaty with no tools and still keep out of the elements? You're not gonna be comfortable, that's not the point, but as comfortable as possible. You probably most likely will not get much sleep. We see all these shelter buildings on YouTube and people bringing out all kinds of gear, shovels, toboggans filled with stuff, food, and then there is always a fire and it's nice and cozy. That's not really survival, that's camping. If you know how to make the fire and you have the knowledge to prepare and bring your sleeping bags and all those stuff, that's not survival. When you have the tools, survival is when you are caught out there and you don't have the means, you have to improvise. When you're doubting every single decision that you make. YouTube is the community of outdoors people is filled with scenarios about what ifs, discussions about what to do in this and that situation, and common for all of them is to be prepared. And being prepared means you bring what you need. But at the same time, when you have counted all the possibilities by bringing all those things that you think you would need, that's not survival. It's you have removed this, the emergency aspect of it, because you have taken all these things with you. Survival is when you don't have those means. You are caught. You're caught out there. You have to improvise. I came out here, I made a shelter, but the process of making it got me very soaked and wet. And even though I came out with the ambition to stay, to spend the night here, it would have been extremely foolish of me to stay. I was wet. It's I would have been worse off. Yes, the shelter was made, but the process of it put me in more jeopardy. And so this raises a lot of questions. What is the best option when you're caught out there? You have to stay dry. If making the shelter gets you soaked and puts you in a worse place, then you have to rethink everything. I think the main point of this exercise is you have to stay dry. And yesterday it wasn't cold. Yesterday was warm. We are in April, and even last night, I think I left from here around 10 o'clock at night. And it was probably only -1, -2 Celsius. And inside the shelter down there, no wind, well insulated. It was probably +6 degrees, +6, +7. Under the snow, where the critters, all the mice, and there is a constant degree. No matter what the temperature is on top of the snow on the surface, down there, it's constantly +4, +6. So how do you make a shelter in winter? Emergency shelter. I'm not talking about camping where you bring out all this stuff like sleeping bags and means to make fire and axes and saws and tents, or you spent the whole day building a debris shelter and then half the day gathering firewood and then you have food with you. That's camping. That's not survival. Survival is when you're caught out there. You might have the knowledge of making all these things, but you are caught out there and you have to improvise. You have to get out. You have to, if you can't get out, you have to minimize the impact of the elements on you. And in winter, your only focus is to stay dry and away from the wind. Walking around in winter in deep snow it's tough. It's tough. You take 10 steps, 20 steps, and you're gonna start sweating. If you ski around or walk around collecting firewood, you're gonna get sweaty. If you get sweaty, you're not gonna dry up at night in your shelter. Not even with a fire. You're not gonna dry up. What I wanted to do with this is to make a shelter on the spot where you're caught. This shelter is very valid. It has been used historically up here in Lapland. It has been used and it has saved a lot of people overnight. They are not comfortable. They are not warm. They are not cozy. But it keeps you away from the wind and it gets you to that manageable temperature. If you can manage to make these shelters and staying dry at the same time, I think this is the best. This is your best option. If I had made this in let's say January or February, I would have been much drier myself because the temperatures are I wouldn't have sweated as much. The snow would have been drier I would have been able to shake off the snow and it wouldn't have melted on my clothes like it did last night. Historically, the indigenous people up here, there were several ways to manage a night in winter, even in extreme colds. Especially among the reindeer herders, among the elderly, they tell stories of how they didn't even have sleeping bags. The only thing they would have with them are their skis, the small axe, and their bags, and the bags had dried meat in them, and a roll of dried birch bark. And sometimes when they were caught out there, they wouldn't even have trees. It was just willows, bushes. They were seek themselves to these areas where willows would grow, immense, huge areas of willow, and they would chop down these green willows, pile them up, get a fire going, because you can get a fire going with green willow. Burn a huge pile of it. They would make two piles. One pile that they would burn, create a coal, and it would melt away the snow. They would come to the ground and they would keep piling on it to keep it burning. And the second pile, after the first pile has burned down, they would take that second pile and place it on top, cover the ash area, and make it tight. It was extremely important to make it wind tight, and they would sleep on top of that, and it would be warm. But there was also dangers with it, because if that green willow on top of the embers, it would dry out during the night, and if it wasn't perfectly covered, wind tight, and there would be a breeze, constant breeze or wind gust, the whole thing could catch on fire, and you would, yeah. But most dangerous would be if it started smoldering, the smoke, while you were sleeping there, and you would breathe in this uh, carbon monoxide. That's what will get you. Breathe that in the whole night, and you wouldn't wake up. So there were dangers with it, but people have done it. They have managed. But it also takes extreme care and precision in making this, and there was dangers involved. If you would have the luxury of skiing around to find your best shelters, one a very good shelter is to find a downed tree, spruce or pine, where the root system is a bit up in the air, and you make your fire there, because you can use that whole root system, put it on fire and sleep next to it. That will keep you warm. There are stories of log fires, long log fires, 3 logs or 2 logs placed on top of each other, and the whole thing smolders during the night. One person on one side and the other on the and another person on the other side. But you also have to set it up in a way that the wind doesn't blow on either person. The wind has to travel alongside for the smoke, to carry away the smoke. There are details in everything, but common for them all is you will get wet. You will get wet. Winter is it's like that. You will get wet. You will get soaked. This shelter would have been amazing if my clothes were dry. Maybe I will come out here tonight with dry clothes, and maybe put in some more twigs in there. But then what's the point? It's not an emergency shelter anymore. Then it becomes camping. Because last night I wouldn't be able to stay here with all my clothes soaked. That would have been foolish. My best option then would be to walk away from here, as I did. My best preparation for last night was to keep close to home. That was my best preparation. If I was really out there, kilometers and kilometers away, it would have been dangerous. Even then, my best option would be to ski out put my energy into that instead, to go home, even if it was kilometers, and I would use the whole night just traveling to go home. At least I would stay warm, soaking in wet, but keep moving and get home. Because ultimately, that is what will save you. So yeah, again, how do you make a shelter that doesn't get you soaked? No tools, just using your knowledge, your experience. So what do you guys think? What's the best option? If you can't bring all the tools with you and you are caught out there, but you have some experience, some knowledge of how to make a shelter with no tools, or using natural spots in nature like under spruce trees and maybe reinforce a little, but still just walking a few meters in deep snow is it's tough. It is very tough. So how do you keep dry? Alright guys, maybe it's time to wrap this up, and but let me know what you think. What would you have done to keep you dry? And we are talking emergency situations, not camping, not bringing out all your tools with you, the food for a night, and spending time collecting wood, or and building your debris shelter, and we're talking emergency. You're caught. My experience is that your best option, number one, is to get out of there. No, if it's manageable to get out 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, and you know the direction home or to the safest cabin or stranger's house, if you know the direction, then get out of there. At least the process of traveling will keep you warm and awake. If you can't do that, then your second option is to, if you have the means to gather firewood and stay in one place using all of the firewood, then do that. Feed the fire at night. Feed it, because that fire will save you. Even if you don't have any shelters around you, that fire, keep it alive, because that will keep you warm. It's not an option to sleep. If you can't make a fire, then stay dry. If that means burying yourself into the snow and just sitting there away from the wind, and sleep is not an option even. Stay dry. A third option. First option, walk away. The process of traveling into that safe place will keep you alive. Second, make a fire, but you have to make sure that that fire, you will be able to maintain it the whole night, because sleep is not an option. Or stay dry. If you can't make a fire, stay dry. Everything is a compromise. You have to make choices. Alright guys, let me know what you think. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I have to edit this somehow that is coherent. So let's see how that goes. Thanks for watching guys. I'll have more coffee and then I'll go.